All right, joining me now from Queensland is the Nationals leader, David Littleproud. Thanks so much for your time, David Littleproud. Now, I've got to ask, Peter Dutton only mentioned permanent migration in the budget speech and not this net migration figure of 160,000, which to me is more significant. He only mentioned that on radio on Friday. Why was that, do you know?
Oh, look, in a budget speech, you've only got certain time. And obviously, we want to be very clear about what the headline number was. And I think what it still goes to the heart of, Andrew, and what our budget reply speech was about was getting back to basics and proving to Australians that you don't always have to spend billions of dollars to solve this nation's problems. You can use common sense and pull the right policy levers to buy time. And that's what we're saying with our whole migration policy is we just want to buy some time to allow supply to catch up and to actually bring in the people we need to actually address some of the issues that we've got, particularly around housing. And when this government was failing to do that, you're always going to have challenges in increasing supply. But when you exacerbated the challenges for state and local governments who wholeheartedly own most of this responsibility of this because they've failed to plan over many years, but you don't exacerbate that with pulling the wrong policy levers at a federal level, and that's where the whole migration policy is about bringing some common sense, bringing some balance, bringing some hope back to young people as well, that maybe one day they may own a home as well.
All right, well, last year we had 260,000 university students come in the country. How many would you like to see come in?
Yeah, and this is where we've also made sure there's a nuance here about supporting regional universities, and regional universities rely heavily on overseas students. It's important we don't take that away from them. We continue to underpin that. But this is where we'll be working with the university sector in making sure that the numbers that we bring in can be housed sustainably and that there is a pathway and a balance in getting that right. Also, in terms of what those students are paying to come to this country to get the best education in the world,
sure,
that they should also make some contribution.
But my point is, if you're taking the net migration projected from 260 to 160, you're going to have a lot less international students, aren't you?
And that is what we'll be working through with the Shadow Immigration Minister and Education Minister in making sure that the universities, particularly in capital cities, appreciate that, but understand that the premise that we're going to support is particularly those regional universities that don't have the financial strength of the big sandstone universities that need to continue to see that overseas student migration numbers. But we'll do that in a way that designs a policy that also sees a contribution from them to make sure that the housing and the money that comes to this country goes to solving that problem as well.
Well, last financial year, 15% of the net migration was working holiday makers, about 75,000. Don't you need those workers in regional towns? You'll be cutting them as well.
Well, we do need the working holiday makers, but we've also got to continue on with the Pacific scheme, and unfortunately the Labor government's made that unviable. But what we'll also be announcing with respect to the numbers is the return of the ag visa, and that's a dedicated visa towards agriculture. And this is to make sure we're getting the balance right also in regional Australia, not just for agriculture. Understand that we've got many pubs out in my part of the world, in outback Queensland, that do rely on backpackers to be able to continue to be able to keep the doors open. They simply don't have the labour force without them. So that's about making sure that agriculture has a designated stream, as we demonstrated before the last election.
David Littleproud,
ensuring that where we...
I'm interested in that because actually you just chose my next question. My next question was on your ag visa. So let's get this straight. You still want university students in the region from overseas. You still want working holiday makers to come and work in the regional towns, and you still want an ag visa. So I'm just putting the question to you, does it start to become hard from the Nationals' point of view, a cut from net migration from the projected 260 to 160 when you still want all these things and all these workers?
No, because what you do is you make the priorities of where the necessity is in the economy and where those pressure points are. And that's what we've been very clear. And you also got to understand where the pressure points are for people in capital cities that are lining up trying to get a rental against hundreds of other people. This is about making sure you use the policy levers with priorities of what are the nation's priorities in our economy to make sure we get that balance right, but understanding that there is also a housing shortage in regional Australia, and we also need some time to allow that to catch up, but it's not as acute as what is in capital cities. So
Indeed.
This is about making the tough decisions that prioritise where the economy needs the support to continue to grow, and particularly in the regions. And I think that's what we've been very clear, is we don't want to see the regions suffer because of an exacerbated problem in capital cities, because we just continue to pour now 1.67 million people, a city bigger than the size of Adelaide, over the next 5 years into our capital cities. It just won't work.
Let's talk about the permanent migration intake proposal, the cut there, because as Peter Dutton has said, you're inevitably cutting out some skilled workers, aren't you? Now, at the moment in that program, last 22-23, we had 10,000 midwives and nurses given permanent migration, 6,000 engineers, 5,000 IT analysts given that permanent residence. So you're going to lose some of these, aren't you?
Well, and again, this is where the priorities need to be cut to go to where the challenges in our economy is. Now, those numbers, we'll work through the balance of those, and also include some of the tradies that we need, because this government had actually cut out bringing in tradies like roofers, tilers, electricians, plumbers, to be able to increase supply of housing. And this is the fine balance that we're going to make sure that we're transparent about in getting that priority list right, and having to have tough conversations with some parts of the economy, that the priorities are about housing. It's about continuing to make sure that we do have the medical support that we need, and continue to increase the training. And that's why regional universities, it's so important that we continue to keep numbers there, particularly in things like medicine and allied health, because we find that more than 40% of those that are trained in the regions will stay and practice in the regions. So this is about making sure that the balances are right, the priorities are set, that goes to the very heart, and that's in making sure that those priority areas are given that priority and maintain that priority where they are.
When it comes to this superannuation for housing deposits policy, won't that just drive up house prices?
Oh, look, I think you've got to look at it in totality of all the policy settings. And that's why when we talk about migration, it's important as well. It's about buying time to increase supply, and also giving that hope to young people that one day they may actually own their own home and get a mortgage. So this is making sure that, I think what Labor has tried to do is isolate on one particular area, whether it be that or whether it be around the fact that we're actually banning the purchase of established homes for foreign investors at the moment. You've got to look at these in totality. It's about increasing supply.
That's only 1% of the market, isn't it? That's only 1% of the market, the foreign investors. Will that really make a dent?
I think 5,000 plus homes in with addition with the other measures around cuts to migration. And what we've been clear about, and I saw one industry analyst say, well, this is not a smart move because it'll stop new developments. That's not right. We've actually only made established homes because if you're a developer and you want to put up a set of units, you have to have a whole lot of pre-sales. And so what you want to do is not undercut the ability for new homes to come on, new developments to come on. So we've been very clear about that, about making sure we get the policy setting right. But that 5,000 is one that goes in addition to the other suite of measures. So I think all that the Labor government's been able to do is try to isolate individual parts of that policy rather than look in totality about a holistic approach to addressing and buying the time to increase supply. And it's now beholden on state governments and local governments to get on with it. And I think one of the real failures of this government is they're keen to announce billions of Australian taxpayers' dollars about how they're going to build homes. But there's no caveats. There's no caveats that we're going to see state and local governments plan quicker and not increase headworks charges and council charges. I mean, I was out in Newcastle the other day. One council alone had lifted their headworks charges by $114,000 a block. Now, that's just clipping the ticket on the way through. Now, if you're going to hand out Australian taxpayers' money, there needs to be caveats about the actual outcomes that you get out of that money. And this is why we just can't blindly make announcements with Australian taxpayers' money. There needs to be caveats, but then you also need to look at the policy levers that don't cost the Australian taxpayer any money at all to increase that supply and buy time.